citizenship of Rosie O'Donnell, as disgusting as she is not the time and attention I would need my commander-in-chief having. He should have taken the 5-6 minutes that required and gotten a briefing on Islam from someone that knows what they're talking about. We don't care about Rosie. She doesn't even live here anymore. The juvenile antics need to stop. And I'm starting to believe more and more God allowed Donald Trump to become president, not to save America, but to judge America. Aaron?
Yeah, Brennan, the people that are sowing these seeds and who are going to reap the whirlwind, you know, it reminds me of the parable that the Lord talked about, the man who built his barns, and he kept building his barns, and then one day the angel came along and said, "Today your life is taken from you," and or words to that effect. You know, these people like Tucker Carlson, Bill Gates, they can get the praise of men. They can get their names put up in plaques. But one day they're going to meet their maker. They're going to meet their creator. And they're going to have to face, you know, stand face to face. The Bible says, prepare to meet thy God. And that's what we're called to do. Will we be clean? As the scripture says, is your name written in the Lamb's book of life?
Amen to that. But everything cannot come down to money. The Bible says that money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. Everything cannot come down to money and cutting a deal. Okay? Everything cannot come down to just simply balancing our checkbook as a country. It has to come down to righteousness. Righteousness exalts a nation. Didn't say their bank accounts exalts a nation. May God save America. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan, and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Now, you've been running on the platform of affordability fixes for New Yorkers, like a rent freeze you mentioned, free buses, city-owned groceries that made you popular with some working New Yorkers, but not so popular with real estate developers and the financial class. You were the only mayoral candidate to march alongside Martin Luther King III and I on our march on Wall Street about DEI on last week as we call for economic justice for all New Yorkers and all Americans. But right now, the top 1% earners in the city pay 40% of the city's income taxes, according to the Empire Center for Public Policy. How do you bring these wealthy residents to the table as mayor, stop them from saying they're leaving, going to Florida? Because we need that tax revenue to pay for some of the things you're talking about. How do you pay for it if they're gone?
Well, the first thing I have to say is I was proud to be the only candidate for mayor at that march. And I was proud because some of the chants at that march, they were asking, is the dream alive?
Right.
Is Dr. King's dream still alive? And he asked the question decades ago, what good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger?
Right.
That's a question that New Yorkers are still wrestling with today in 2025. And so what I have put forward is a vision to make the most expensive city in the United States of America affordable. At a time when we have the wealthiest city, it is also one where 1 in 4 are living in poverty. And to your point, we have a number of New Yorkers who are doing quite well. The top 1% of New York City earns $1 million or more a year. And my vision is not one where they leave, it is one where they stay. It is
How do you get them to stay?
in part by showing them that asking them to pay more in taxes would increase even their quality of life. Because when you ask New Yorkers, what is it that is making them feel uneasy in this city? You often hear from them about the cleanliness of our city, the safety of our city, the affordability of our city. We are not asking to raise these taxes for the sake of it. We're asking so that we can actually make the slowest buses in the country fast and free, so that we can actually create a Department of Community Safety that would deploy dedicated teams of mental health outreach workers to the top 100 stations of the highest levels of mental health crises and homelessness. That relationship proving that that tax dollar leads to that investment, because we know that it's not just a fiscal policy that takes somebody from New York City to somewhere else. Because a lot of New Yorkers, if they leave, they go to California, another high tax state. They go to New Jersey, another high tax state. Many people say they might go to Florida, but I have seen and heard from many New Yorkers concern about this new elimination of vaccine mandates in Florida that makes them question whether they would ever want to live there.
Yeah.
Welcome back to More War Monday, folks. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, Marxism March of Lies continues the war on our country. Socialism, Marxism, communism, the red-green axis, pro-Hamas. Yes, my fellow Americans, all of these apply to the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, who you just listened to. And let's be clear, the Democrat nominee is nearly guaranteed to win every time in that town. That simple fact should have your undivided attention as the financial capital of the world and America's largest city falls to Marxism and socialism, electing a Muslim who rabidly supports Hamas. I wish I was being hyperbolic or exaggerating. Every sane American is asking these two questions. How could this happen? Why is it happening? Well, I'll tell you why. Lies, and a bunch of them. Lies about how socialism is better than the people governing themselves. Lies about how it's never really been tried in our country. Lies about how socialist government is like Christianity. And the list goes on and on. My guest today wrote an article about these lies recently published in Town Hall. Dr. Alex McFarland is the leader of Alex McFarland Ministries and is a youth, religion, and culture expert. He's a national talk show host on radio and television, speaker, educator, and is author of 20 books. On the American Family Radio Network, Alex is heard live on Exploring the Word on American Family Radio, airing every day on nearly 200 radio stations across the U.S. You should be familiar. The Alex McFarland Show airs weekly on NRB TV, providing biblically faithful TV and discussion on current events affecting our nation. He's currently hosting the Alex McFarland Speaker Series in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which includes special guests Dinesh D'Souza, Charlie Kirk, Dr. Gary Chapman, and Fox News' Lauren Green. Sounds like a great program. Alex, welcome to the Rob Maness Show. If we got you, I think we were having some technical difficulties, but I think he's here. He is here.
I'm here. Thank you very, very much. It's a great honor to be on, Rob. Thank you.
Oh, sir, we're honored to have you on and for your time. I know it takes a lot of time for one guest to come on this show for an hour, but our audience loves to dive deep into a topic, and your article really resonated with me when I looked at it, and I said, this is what we're all talking about: is how does this happen and why it happens. This march of Marxism and socialism through our government institutions, especially, So I'm excited to have you on so we can talk about that. And it's relevant to what's happening today. I know you saw the tragic, brutal murder of the Ukrainian refugee lady on the train in Charlotte by that criminal. The guy had been released 14 times. I mean, I guess we go to, let's go to that. The policies these people want to put in place always favor
Well,
more criminality, don't they?
they do. I'm glad you bring up that. I mean, it's very tragic, very sad that here a Ukrainian young lady comes to America for ostensibly a better life. And on the absolutely ludicrous, unneeded waste of tax dollars, quote, light rail in Charlotte, gets murdered brutally by a fatherless murderer from the hood who has an arm length of convictions, but yet is out on the street. So let me just say this. For 5.5 years, I lived in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina's largest city. And I was president of a small seminary and Bible college. And I was there and was very, very involved in the city of Charlotte. Rob, we had conferences there that would bring 5,000 people from 35 states, had breakfast with the mayor. So I was, as a small seminary and private college president, I was very involved in Charlotte. Well, 15, 16, 17 years ago, the Democrats were pushing, light rail. It will go back and forth from downtown Charlotte to Pineville. Now, Pineville is a rather affluent part, a suburb outside the downtown. And let me say that NODA, which is called North Davidson, if anybody's from Charlotte, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The inner city of Charlotte, there's no reason that a train is going to exist because the people that live in affluent Pineville will drive their BMWs, Mercedes, Lexuses, and Bentleys into downtown. Okay? And I remember, and this is not something that goes around the Beltline. It's not like MARTA or something in Atlanta.
Right.
It's a straight piece of train track that goes back and forth, right? And they said, if anything, and this is brought back so many memories when I heard the very explosive, volatile term light rail. And there's nothing light about it. It went way over budget. It went years over budget time-wise. And they said, all this is going to do is take the meth dealers and the panhandlers out to the neighborhoods of Pineville, which it does. But, the liberals, they love public transportation. They love creating big government capital expenditures that really don't better the life. They don't serve. They don't accomplish anything, really. The only place I know of that the subways are really done well is New York City. New York City knows how to move people around. But it's very unfortunate. I lived in Charlotte. I could not get out of there fast enough. It's just, I know tons of people live there. It's as congested as Atlanta. We had to budget an hour to go most anywhere, but it's very sad. Nothing good has come out of Charlotte light rail. Certainly not this homicide committed just hours ago.
Yeah. And, when you watch the video, Alex, you get the sense that this young lady feels very safe and comfortable. And based on what you're telling me, you should feel anything but that, where totally that line is going through.
She's on her phone. I've seen the video. And this guy is sitting there and just all of a sudden starts stabs her in the neck, unprovoked. For one thing, let me say that there are some people that are given to wickedness and evil, and they should not be on the streets. And Rob, I want to say this, and I would vote for this. Millions of Americans would vote for this. When a felon is on the streets and does something like this, as often happens, and I know, look, I've been in 36 jails and prisons around America, 36, to preach. Most recently, we did evangelistic crusades in 2 Texas prisons. But over the last 25 years, I've been in jails all over America, death row in Virginia twice. So I know a little bit about the the cultural landscape of the American inmates. But when felons are on the streets doing things like this, the last judge that set them free needs to also be complicit and held accountable.
There's got to be a way to do that. I think people would vote for that if they were presented with that as an option, because we have to have some deterrence to these repeated offenders like this, violent offenders that the judge had to know. I mean, there's no way that judge on release number 14 didn't know that this guy was a violent offender and a repeat offender. That's a great idea. I like that idea.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's called the recidivism rate and the revolving door that, people, and by the way, most Americans support the death penalty for convicted murderers. And I will just say this, as an ordained minister in the prisons, inmates will speak very freely to ministers. And I've had many glorious moments where inmates confess to crimes because they want to get right with God and man. And, very transparent. But I have also, I've had inmates say very candidly, ain't nothing going to happen to me. I'll be out of here in 3 months. And there's a brazen just arrogance, knowing that you just have to appear in front of enough judges till you get the bleeding heart Democrat that puts you back on the streets. Now, here's the thing that we ought to legislate. If some judge wants to be a utopian, pipe dream, rose-colored glasses, woke liberal, fair enough. But when someone like this commits a homicide, and it happens all the time, the most recent judge that put a murderer back on the streets, that judge needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, it happens repeatedly, Alex. We got to take a commercial break. When we come back, I want to dive into your the 10 lies that you debunked in your article, and more about this Mamdani character, because he goes way beyond the socialism that folks are used to hearing about from Western Europe and those kind of places. And it's going to get really sporty if he gets elected. We'll be right back with Dr. Alex McFarland.
Which is that the fight for each and every person to live a dignified
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're once again, unfortunately, talking about the war inside of America. It's the war of Marxism and socialism marching through our cities, our towns, our political infrastructure, our institutions, and it's got a foothold now. And that was at a town hall of the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City, Zoran Mondani. My guest today is Dr. Alex McFarland, who wrote a great article. Go check it out. It's at townhall.com, the 10 Lies of Socialism. And Alex, you know, that guy that was in the video there, he looks like a blue collar working man. And he's out there. The interesting thing about that video is the individual, but the other part that really bothers me is the people in that crowded room shouting him down and not wanting to hear the truth. That's scary.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. I mean, you know, here you and I are, Rob, we're 2 days away from the annual observance of 9/11. And I want to say September 11, 2001, when Mamdani's worldview was responsible for the deaths of nearly 3,000 New Yorkers. The trade towers fell. You know, the Billy Graham Ministry, Samaritan's Purse, as the sun rose on September 13, just 2 days after 9/11, I was in the rubble of Ground Zero, Rob. I rode on a bus with the Billy Graham Ministry. They called me. I'd been on the radio show. And midday during the 12th, on September 12th, I was riding to New York City. We got in about midnight, slept for about 4 hours. 5 a.m., we were at the Javits Center where FEMA had their headquarters. We were being briefed. And by about 7 a.m., we were literally in the rubble of Ground Zero on September 13. I was there for 2 weeks. And I remember meeting with Mayor Giuliani, going to Ladder Company 12. I remember going to the National Guard Armory and talking literally with hundreds of people searching for their loved ones, weeping. As you may recall, in the trade towers was a daycare center and kids had died. I've got pictures, Rob. Sometime maybe we'll go over some of these. I've got an external hard drive with a lot of my pictures. Ground Zero had not even been secured. There was not a fence around it yet.
Right.
And I remember the cadaver dogs that had on these little leather boots, and they were going through the rubble. I was in amongst all of that doing chaplaincy work. Here's my point. A Muslim Marxist to be the mayor of New York City. Why don't we also put Hirohito on the state seal of Hawaii? And the sad thing is, most of your listeners won't even know what that reference is about. But Pearl Harbor and Hirohito, Mamdani, a Muslim mayor of New York City, where Islam took the lives of 3,000 Americans. And we've not even yet gotten to his Marxist politics that will bleed dry the 13th largest economy in the world. And then, I mean, you think about it. New York City is a city of 103 billionaires. And Mamdani says that it should be illegal to be a billionaire. Outside of Israel, the most dense population, most densely populated Jewish community outside of Israel is New York City, Manhattan. And they're going to elect an avowed, brazen anti-Semite as their mayor. It's just not even rational, just not even reasonable. Citizens of Metro New York, please wake up. I don't elect a Democrat, as bad as that would be. You know, my goodness, I am. I don't have a vocabulary adequate to describe the concern, if not contempt, I have over U.S. Democrats. But Mamdani, a Muslim Marxist, anti-capitalist, anti-constitutionalist, anti-American, anti-Jewish, it's just a type of societal suicide. It really is.
It is. And let me say, as somebody that survived the Pentagon attack on 9/11, thank you very much. I spent all day on September 11th trying to fight the fires and help people get out of there alive and identify aircraft evidence, those kind of things. And then by the 13th, I was in the middle of helping put the war plan together, trying to figure out who did this and how we were going to respond. So I deeply appreciate everything that everybody did.
God
so
bless you.
Family.
Thank you for serving our country. Yeah. And, the plane that went down in the field in Pennsylvania, I tell everybody I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, but really I'm out in the county. My family for the last 200 years had been a farm family out in a little area called Pleasant Garden, but it's Guilford County. It's really outside of Greensboro. And the stewardess that died on the plane in Pennsylvania was actually a neighbor of ours. I did not know this person all that well, but yeah, 9/11 still hits close to home. And Rob, this summer we did 7 youth camps, 1,200 teenagers in 7 states. We're in Montana, upstate New York, Indiana, Georgia, South Carolina, Colorado. We've done youth God and country camps for 25 years. Anyway, we were talking about 9/11, and I will say out of 1,200 summer middle school and high school, maybe 10% even tangentially know what 9/11 was.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to lament public schools. I call them government schools. Government schools, they don't teach about 9/11. They don't.
Right.
Kids don't even know about 9/11. And this was our Pearl Harbor. Those Muslim terrorists, they sucker punched us. And,
it changed our entire world. It changed the rest of my military career and my family's life dramatically. Just from that perspective, it changed our whole society. Here's some scary polling for you, Dr. McFarland, and that is just this morning out of Rasmussen, 62% of the age group between 18 and 30, I think were the demographic numbers, would favor confiscation of wealth from billionaires. That is right up Mamdani's alley there, and it gets to the lie about there's plenty of money to use to create overwhelmingly 100% government programs and those kind of things. And unfortunately, our younger people, based on what they've been shown and indoctrinated with, are believing it.
Yeah. This might not be a perfect analogy, but let's think about this. Let's say that we're all outside and we're breathing oxygen. And let's say, they look at everybody's blood oxygen level. And here's a person who has spent their life, they don't smoke, they've never smoked, and they've exercised, and they've got a really good blood oxygen level. And then you've got somebody over here who maybe has asthma, or somebody who's lived a very unhealthy lifestyle, made very, very poor choices, and they have a pure blood oxygen level. And so somebody says, oh, this isn't fair. This guy has a great healthy rate of respiration, and this guy over here can barely breathe. It's not fair. Let's close the system. Let's put a lid over the field and make sure that everybody has the same amount of oxygen. Well, first of all, it is not going to equalize anything. It's just going to shut off, and eventually the breathable oxygen is going to, just get unbreathable, and it's going to ultimately kill everybody. That's how it is with closing the economic system. See, capitalism is an open system. Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, talked about a rising or an invisible hand that lifts the condition of all people. Everybody, the standard of living is elevated ultimately as we work, as we produce things, as jobs are created. And, you've heard the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, socialism is a closed system. Now, the Mamdanis will serve themselves because always there are, the elites and the minions and the proletariats that are pushed down. And the idea that wealth should be confiscated and redistributed, it's the assumption of a finite pie. And I've had look at universities where I've spoken or debated. I'll say, do you believe, okay, if you had a meal on your table last night, conversely, was somebody on the other side of the world going hungry? And kids will say, yes. It doesn't work that way. It's not a one-to-one correspondence. Yes, some people have worked hard, started jobs, they put their money at risk, they employ people, they produce a good or a service, and the cost of goods sold is determined, and there is a margin of profit, and wealth is created. That is not necessarily a bad thing. Rob, I was on a show back in the spring of this year with a preacher named Rob Paget, and he's a lefty. I'm sure he probably means well, but his worldview, I would say, is not reasoned through as meticulously as it could be. But anyway, we were talking momentarily about Ford Motor Company. And Ford Motor Company in the first quarter had made like a couple of $1 billion of profit. He said, that's obscene. Obscene. Yeah, really? Well, they provide jobs for well over 1 million Americans, and jobs enable people to get married and have families and buy groceries and pay tuition and raise up children and send those kids to college who perpetuate the human race. There's nothing necessarily obscene about a profit. And the people who are innovative and entrepreneurial like myself and have started businesses. 30 years ago, I had my wife Angie, in the world, we had $58 and a Chevy car with 200,000 miles 30 years ago. Now, we've started 3 businesses, lived within our means, buried 3 parents. The only thing I inherited from my father was a stack of invoices that I paid, $153,000 of medical bills that I, with God's help, was able to pay off. And here we are, with been to 5 continents and have 21 books in print. But, and I'll be the first to tell you, God has blessed us. But we've worked our little heinies off and engaged in this thing called deferred gratification. And we've not had any government assistance, and I don't want it and wouldn't take it anyway. But here's the thing. Socialism is a closed system. It doesn't provide more oxygen for anyone's blood level. In fact, it suffocates. And so the other thing, and there's so many things we could say, socialism is not compassionate. I put it in my article. It's a lie that socialism helps people. It really doesn't. It's a lie that socialism is affordable and our economy could handle it. It can't. And as long as there is free market principled capitalism, that's what we have is principled capitalism.
That's right.
People are going to, there will be a mass exodus. Ultimately, I mean, if the people of Metro New York are unfortunate enough to elect Mamdani, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to be the end of America, but it will be the end of New York City.
Sure will.
Guarantee that. Because people will leave, as they should.
Absolutely right. We got to take another break, sir. When we come back, though, you talk about there's a couple of lies about Christianity and socialism and Marxism that you address in the article. I want to dive into that because I hear it a lot. Well, Christians are socialists, and I have never seen anything in the Bible that leads me to that conclusion. So it'll be interesting to hear from a reverend, a pastor that studied this, exactly why people say that and what's the matter with that lie. Be right back with Dr. Alex McFarland.
The businessman from Texas that spent years trying to bring the perfect red heifers to Israel is coming to speak in Collierville, Tennessee, outside of Memphis, on Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. They now have sacrificed one of those red heifers. There it is burning. They've now gained 10 gallons of ashes. Why do they need this? Well, the Old Testament, Numbers chapter 19, says that for the purification ceremony, for their temporary tabernacle or full-time temple, they need the ashes of a perfect red heifer. This is the first time this has happened in over 2,000 years. The story is going global. It's highly controversial. In fact, there's even a connection between the attacks on Israel on October 7th and these 5 red heifers. Come and hear him speak live in person, Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Full details, worldviewstore.com, and to get your tickets, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com.
You're correct. I mean, I think it's what, 1%-3% maybe profit margins for grocery stores. And you've got to be pretty sophisticated to keep those things going. Obviously, this is not a solution. I think one of the real problems is, you mentioned this in the opening, these millennials that are part of Mandani's policy circle, they've come through these indoctrination centers and been told how glorious and how great Marxism and socialism are, and now they're coming into the real world and trying to promote those ideas. I think the only way we're going to successfully solve this is when people get fully exposed to the consequences of their terrible decisions and fully experience it for themselves. Because I think many times in life we do not fully experience the consequences of our decisions. And I think it's probably time that they experience it and learn the hard way. And once you learn the hard way, you usually make better decisions in the future.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and we're talking about the internal war in the United States of Marxism and socialism's march through America and how it's got a foothold now with my guest, Dr. Alex McFarland, who's got a great article at townhall.com about the 10 lies of socialism. And Alex, I mentioned before the break that there's 2 lies about Christianity as associated with socialism. One is that, well, Christians are socialists. Just look at the New Testament and the stories of Jesus and his disciples. And then 2, it's that Christianity, it can survive and flourish under a socialist government. Let's take the first one, the first lie initially, and that is that the Christianity is socialist. Where do the people come up with this stuff?
Well, thank you for having me on, Mr. Maness. It is a great honor to be on with you. And let me just say, as we embark on this topic, that I have spent the last 36 years in Christian higher academia, traveled to libraries around the world, interviewed scholars of every strata, visited 72 sites throughout the Middle East and the Holy Land, and I'll be back there in March of 26. In fact, I was supposed to go to Israel again in October of this year and even meet briefly with Netanyahu, and I don't have time to go there. But I just preface saying what I'm about to say, that the accurate understanding of Scripture and church history has not been a hobby for me, but a career. And therefore, I don't speak about this subject glibly at all. But the Bible, in no way can the Bible be legitimately construed to support socialism. Now, let me give you a couple of things. For instance, in the 10 Commandments, Exodus 21-17, it says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house," apostrophe S. So the Bible presupposes private property ownership rights. Now, the 19th century socialist, Proudhon, the French socialist, he said, quote, "Property is theft." False. The Bible presupposes private property ownership. For example, in Acts chapter 4 and 5, there was a married couple, Ananias and Sapphira, and they sold a piece of land to kind of put on a big show and give the money, not because they were feeling charitable, but because they were trying to look impressive in front of the other disciples. And they lied. But Peter said to them, while you had the property, was it not your own? See, they didn't have to sell it. Now, if you want to sell something and give the money to the church, that's fine. But the thing is, Peter didn't quibble with them that they owned property. He reprimanded Ananias and Sapphira because they tried to, give as a big show to look impressive in front of everybody. But Old and New Testaments, private property is presupposed. And then also work. 2 Thessalonians says, if a man will not work, neither shall he eat. Now, is there voluntary charity? Of course. Benevolence. Yeah. But the idea of a welfare state where people are rewarded for laziness, not only is that unbiblical, it's ungodly.
Yeah, it sure is. I'm glad you pointed that out because, a lot of people use the old saying, where Christ said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I didn't have a home, in Matthew, when I was, homeless, you housed me. And that because of that, that is socialism. But that's not what it said to me. So I'm glad you brought that out of that because that's a concept of voluntary doing good things for people that need it, not not carrying people that don't want to work because they're lazy.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, let me just say this about the state of charitable benevolent giving. And America has been, for 2 centuries, America has absolutely been the most philanthropic nation in the world. Not only have we been able to help our own, we've hugely, hugely helped other nations. And it's been American Judeo-Christian moral capitalism that has pulled developing third world countries out of indigency. But let me just say this. May of last year, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was on a show, and the host was bashing the American church and speaking in just vague generalities. The host interviewing me was like, the church is this, and the church is that. And I had listened to all of this that I could. Now, before I tell you what happens next, let me just say I was interviewed a few years ago by Gannett Newspapers, a reporter for Gannett Newspapers, and it was about the subject of should churches enjoy tax-free status? Because I've debated a number of atheists, and the atheists would say, "Oh, churches they should pay income tax off of the collection plate." Well, since 1896, Congress passed a law that said churches are tax exempt. When they take up the offering on Sunday, they don't have to pay tax on that because churches do so much good. Churches in every community are an engine of benevolence. Now, when Gannett Newspapers interviewed me just shortly before COVID on the subject of should churches pay income tax, I thought this reporter, because he told me he wasn't a Christian, I'm not going to use his name. He's pretty famous, and I want to respect his anonymity because I have done my best to minister to him. But many listeners would know this particular journalist, and he's a good man. But he said, I asked him, "Are you a Christian?" He said, "No, not really. I'm not religious." But much to my pleasant surprise, he vehemently defended that churches should be tax exempt. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Look, I've done so many interviews and stories." He said, "Churches operate clothes closets, homeless shelters, soup kitchens." He said, and I quote Gannett Newspaper, "Churches more than pay their way." And he said, if suddenly the churches had to pay income tax on the Sunday morning collection plate, he said, first of all, many of the 345,000 churches would instantly go out of business. And he said, there is no way the government could fill the void created if all of these church benevolent programs were gone. And I will say this, look, when I was in seminary, and I was involved with a number of churches in rural Virginia. And then I was, for 11 years, I was a youth pastor at one of the major Baptist churches in Greensboro, North Carolina. And then I've pastored several others, preached in 2,200 churches, literally. Rob, and thank God, how many times I've helped carry groceries to shut-ins and food. And we'd go into the inner city, and all the people under the railroad bridges, the homeless people, we would be outdoors making sandwiches, having a good time, feeding hundreds of inner city people. Yes, telling them about Jesus. I've got friends in Cincinnati. One of the great churches in our nation is called Landmark Baptist Church. They're in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, the pastor there is a good friend of mine. And they do a thing called the Prayhound Bus. And they go into the inner city, and on bitterly cold Cincinnati mornings, they give hot soup and hot chocolate and hot coffee to the street people. And they tell them about Jesus. And Matt Holman is the pastor. And I know the people that do that. But I got to tell you about Atlanta. Now, just hang with me. So I'm in Atlanta, and this host interviewing me is bashing the church. Oh, the church is this and that. So we had about a 2-hour lunch break, and I called several folks that I know that are in the benevolent world. Now, get this. Every year, the 100 million adult evangelicals, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, Christians of every flavor. 345,000 churches, nearly 500,000 ordained clergy. All right, this big animal we call Christendom, American Christendom, gives $1.2 to $1.7 trillion a year in benevolent giving. Now, here's the thing. 85% of every charitable dollar comes from the pockets of people of faith. In fact, the demographic least likely to give their money to help anybody are the more left-leaning liberal.
Right.
And so whenever I get lectured by the left about how we need to be generous, I'm like, okay, if you want to give money, why don't you start with your own checkbook, my friend? Because, taxes, tithes, and just out of my own pocket, God knows 85 cents of every charitable dollar comes from the pockets of Christians already.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, Dr. McFarland. And it's true. That's the amazing part of it. It's true. And your friend that said, the reporter said, the government would never be able to make up for it. That right there, that number should make it plain for all to see. When we come back from this last break, I got to get you to talk about how to debunk the lie that Christianity can survive in a socialist Marxist government, because it really can't. Not the way it's supposed to. Anyway. We'll be right back with Dr. Alex McFarland.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
So Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and some of these other folks have not endorsed him. And that is to your point about the layers of the onion, because they know when you peel that back that he does, in fact, really want to defund the police. He wants to decarcerate. He wants to close jails. He supports, I mean, you go through the list. His ties to a group like Students for Justice in Palestine, which is funded by American Muslims for Palestine, are very deep. American Muslims for Palestine has Hamas connections. He started an SJP chapter at his college. I think if you're a Jewish American living here in New York City, I would be very, very concerned about that. And I think he's going to be the poster child for Hamas here in America if he gets elected New York City mayor.
The Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're discussing once again, unfortunately, Marxism and socialism's march through America and the war that we have to fight internally to prevent it from taking over completely, because it's extremely important. When you just hear what you just heard about the Democrat candidate that's the nominee for mayor of New York City, who's almost guaranteed to win, is part of the red-green axis, the Islam and Marxist axis. And this man is the epitome of that. He is born into it, and he espouses it. He even wants the government to own the grocery stores in New York City. And we all know what happens with government-owned grocery stores, no matter where it's been tried, whether it's Kansas City, which is the truth, or Moscow. They end up with empty shelves, and they can't make a profit, and they can't survive, and people starve because of it. And that's why. But this is worse. This is the red-green axis taking a foothold in the United States of America and the financial capital of the world and the largest city of the world. And a lot of people that are Jewish are voting for this guy and putting their money behind him. And a lot of people that are also Christians are doing that too, because the atheists can't do it by themselves in New York City. So there's a lot of folks that have bought into the lies of Marxism and the lies of socialism. And one of them is that Christianity can survive under a socialist Marxist government. And my guest today is Dr. Alex McFarland. He's talking about his article, The 10 Lies of Socialism, that he debunks in that article in townhall.com. You should go check it out. It's a great article. And Alex, that question, I think, is very important. How do you debunk people that say that, tell that lie that Christianity, or really any religion other than the worship of government, can survive in a socialist government?
Well, by the way, thanks, Rob, for having me on. It's a great honor to be on. And thank you for doing a deep dive on this topic and devoting more than, 3 minutes to it. I mean, just look, for those that say socialism can coexist with Christianity, that's just false. In a Marxist state, the laws of man always override the laws of God. I mean, look at China, look at North Korea, look at Russia, and all of the places around the world where it is a socialist, if not communist, regime. And the Bible is clear, that we are to be charitable. And of course, in the book of Acts, it says the believers held things in common. In other words, they shared with each other, but it was voluntary. It was not compulsory. Now, communism is not the same as communism, to have voluntary charity, but it said also as everyone had need. And certainly there was accountability. And so the Bible talks about the law of Christ in Galatians chapter 6:2, which is love. Now, the law of Christ, love your neighbor, which means to seek the highest good of your neighbor. But if the one that would try to somehow mesh militantly secular, godless socialism with Christianity, I mean, how about also invoke and defend the other laws of Christ, like the sacredness of human life, the defense of life, honoring the worship day of the week, affirming the nuclear family, condemning sodomy and transgenderism. I mean, those that envision this pipe dream utopia. They're very convenient and selective about what of the Bible they think they want to acknowledge and what they would suppress. But my goodness, history shows us that Christianity has, and Judaism, by the way, because listen, I think the utopians, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, and the AOCs and the Mamdanis and Barack Hussein Obama, they know the only thing that really stands between this global utopia that they envision is really the Judeo-Christian worldview and the nuclear family, all of which suffer in a totalitarian regime. You know, many of our founders warned us about this, but I want to give you a time to respond. But I mean, history tells us that Christianity always is a casualty of statism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why, and I wanted to get your take on this. That's why there is a red-green axis. This axis between this connection between Islam and Marxism, because this is my view. I started very young getting familiar with Islam and Muslim society. When I was a kid, my dad took us to North Africa, and we were around Islamic terrorism even in the late 60s, early 70s. So I've been dealing with this for a long time and looking at it. But Islam, in my view, is not a religion. It's a government. It's a form of government backed by a tyrannical ideology. And I think that's what I know that tells me to believe that's why they get along and why they can do this, because it fits very well together.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly doctrines and practices that characterize Islam, but really it is a societal regime. And make no mistake about it. And I know I've talked to some college students. I remember a dialogue I was having at West Texas A&M, where a student who was a jihadist, he just very openly said to me, he said, "I want to kill all Jews and Christians." A student said that to me, staring into my eyes. And I said, I'm a Christian. I'm here to speak and defend Christianity. Would you like to kill me? And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, yes. So these people are very naive. And Islam wants to establish a worldwide caliphate. And you're right. You're absolutely right, Rob. It is a government. Now, here is something that, lest you feel like acknowledgement that Islam is a violent, militaristic religion to subjugate all voices of dissent. Read the book by Samuel Huntington, The Clash of Civilizations.
Right.
Huntington was a Harvard professor and a part of the Carter administration, not a right-wing MAGA Christian conservative. And even Huntington, he quotes Jimmy Carter, milk toast, tepid Jimmy Carter, who said, Islam cannot live in peace with any of its neighbors. Islam's innards are bloody. Its borders are bloody. The loss of Christianity, the vacuum created by the ebb of Christianity and the breakdown of the family, something rushes in. And what is rushing in to our secularized, relativistic society first is Marxism, then communism. And really, I would say this, the two juggernauts that are arm wrestling for the future of the world, one is the iron fist of communism, the other is the iron sword of Sharia. And one thing and one thing only has the capability to hold these two forces at bay, and that is Christianity. I would think just pragmatically, even an atheist who has no interest in God, just pragmatically might have a vested interest in saying, look, hey, the church changes people's lives. It holds back totalitarianism. So let's tolerate Christianity Even the atheist Richard Dawkins admits that. Richard Dawkins, who is certainly no friend of Christianity, but even Dawkins has just in recent years come around to say, oh my goodness, if we don't have Christianity, we're going to be Muslim. Maybe I might rethink my suppression of the Christian message. I got to say this, Rob. In the aftermath of 9/11, Ann Coulter took a lot of flack, and I've booked Ann Coulter. She's spoken for us in our events. She's very intelligent. But Ann Coulter said to save the Middle East, go in, kill their leaders, convert the people to Christianity. And of course, the woke media, oh, what a terrible thing to say. But that would work. I mean, that would save those cultures and ultimately redound to the greater good of the people. The spread of the gospel holds back tyranny. It really does. Let me give you a quote. Harry Truman, 1950. Not a MAGA Republican. Harry Truman said, quote, the fundamental basis of America's laws was Moses on the Mount. Okay, that's the Ten Commandments. Right. And here's what he said. He went on, and he was speaking to the Conference of Attorney Generals, February of 1950. Harry Truman said, our government was based on Exodus, Matthew, Isaiah, and Paul. I don't think we emphasize that enough these days. Okay, the book of Exodus, that's the Ten Commandments. Matthew, that's the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. The book of Isaiah, 3 branches of government. And Paul, that's Romans 13, 1 through 7. Okay, now, Harry Truman concluded, if we don't have a proper fundamental moral background, we will end up with a totalitarian government which does not believe in the rights for anybody but the rights of the state. End of quote.
That's right.
And that's right. Really true. Folks, if you want to be under the iron fist of government, the property and the means of production only in the hands of the cold, compassionless government, that's Mamdani and AOC. But if you want what we've had, which is prosperity, stability, liberty, if you want that, you have to tolerate what gave us that. And what gave us that was Judeo-Christian, principled representative constitutionalism and capitalism.
Thank you, sir, so much. That's a great way to wind it up. And I sincerely appreciate your time. You've got a great speaker series going on right now. You can find Alex at Alex McFarland on X and get to all of his websites and organizations through there. Got about 10 seconds left, sir. Anything else to say before we say bye?
My website is alexmcfarland.com. I'd love to come and speak or debate wherever. Reach out, and may God bless America.
God bless you, sir. Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate it. Tomorrow is Training Tuesday. Dr. Kat Lindley's with me. We're going to talk through the excoriation of Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. by these evil, elitist, establishment politicians that you saw last week. He's fighting for you and me, and that's the side we should be on. We'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show, and I'll be on the after show in the X Spaces starting right now.